Hey there troops, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and today I want to talk about the future of Firestorm. Now, I know this is a pretty conflicting thing because some people are of course still invested in the base game, but sadly at the moment there just really isn't a lot to talk about in the base game until May when we see new modes and maps. But at the moment, I wanted to discuss what is going to happen with Firestorm and where it should be heading next. You know, what are we looking for really in terms of this becoming a better mode and this becoming something that we can invest more hours into. I, for one, have already played this for an obscene amount of time, and, you know, I can safely say that there are lots of things that I would like to see happen. So to begin with, we definitely need a restructure of the loot system. Now, although there has been some changes to make sure that things don't stack on top of each other, the loot system is far too chaotic, and I would like to see something along the lines of death boxes become a thing. I think it's just something that needs to happen. I think it's the cleanest way of providing a loot system in Battlefield 5 Firestorm, and I really think that this is something that I personally hope gets a good amount of attention, because it will be something that needs, you know, lots of testing and lots of, you know, checking and doing to make sure it's a fluid loot system, because the last thing you want is something like PUBG where, you know, people are staring at these boxes for ages and ages. If we could try and make it a bit more snappier like Apex Legends, that's definitely something I would vouch for. Now moving on, I'd like to see some introductions of new weapons, and when I say new weapons, I mean there are a lot of weapons in the base game of Battlefield 5 that aren't in Firestorm, but very well could be. For example, the M30 drilling, for example the Krag Yorkson sniper rifle, even things like the Lewis gun, for example, are weapons that just don't feature in Firestorm. There are loads of Battlefield 5 weapons that are in the game presently that aren't in Firestorm that I would really like to see transition in, be it via a weekly rotation or bi-weekly rotation, or just put in the game permanently. I think this is something that could work very well, and I think more importantly would definitely change some of the situations that we're seeing in Firestorm. I, for one, I think I've gotten quite used to the meta, which is why I recently made a video about the meta, but I really think it's just something that, you know, could happen. It's something that seems relatively easy in terms of transferring assets between the base game and Firestorm, and I think it's something that could add a nice little edge to the game, and I think something that a lot of fans of the game would look forward to. Another thing I'd like to see is the permanent introduction of duos. I don't understand how this hasn't been a thing yet. We do know that it's coming into the game at part of Tides of War, but we don't know if it's going to be for a limited time or if it's going to stay. It says limited time, but I feel that the community itself wants duos to most certainly be something that sticks around for much longer. And, you know, duos, in my opinion, in Firestorm would just be a nice trade-off. I think a lot of people in the game right now, there's a bit of a disconnect, because when you play solos, it feels like, oh, you know, I can win solo engagements pretty well, but then all of a sudden you're playing squads, and it's very easy to feel overwhelmed by what's happening in front of you, and I feel like having 2 players instead of 4 is a really nice in-between for players that, you know, are growing accustomed to the game, and a lot of us do have just that one gamer buddy that we play with, and, you know, that would be it. You know, that one friend that we text and say, hey, are you online? And I really hope the duos get a permanent introduction. Another thing I'd really like to see is the introduction of limited time modes, and I know this is something that we have seen in other games like Fortnite, but I do think it's a successful way of giving a unique spin on an already enjoyable experience. In Battlefield 5, I would like to see, for example, a tanks-only Battle Royale. Imagine, you know, having Battle Royale, but only tanks spawn in, and you can only spawn in tanks. You know, you get power dropped into tanks. That would be a really cool way of doing it, in my opinion. Another thing I'd like to see is something along the lines of, you know, back to basics, where only bolt actions rifles spawn in, and you have to fight the Firestorm with a bolt action rifle setup only, or even a close quarters setup where, you know, the zones are forced into town-like areas like things like Odenburg, and the only weapons you have at your disposal are SMGs and shotguns. I really think this would be an interesting way of messing around with the game, and I'd like to see it come in at some point just to give a bit of fun, and perhaps even coax some of the best players into trying Firestorm a little bit more. And finally, I think I'd like to see an expansion of the game mode. You know, I'd like to see it head into some new places, perhaps in terms of extending the map a little bit and adding a few more areas, but also in terms of player count. Now, I do want to say that I have absolutely no problem with this being 64 players. In fact, I think the pacing of the game is perfect and it suits me, and I really enjoy it. I think, you know, the pacing of Firestorm is something I would really say is on point for me. But if we could have a larger map zone, and if we could have more players, you know, steadily creeping in towards the 100 region, I think that would be beneficial in terms of intensifying it a tiny bit more, but also in terms of just, you know, the fact is that the larger the Battle Royale mode and the larger map space that we have to mess around with, I think people enjoy a little bit more, because a lot of the time, you know, sometimes you spawn into a map and you're like, ah, damn, you know, my favorite location to land is not in this zone. It's a bit of a bummer. You have to adjust. It would be really cool if we could kind of move away from that, but we'll see how it goes. You know, it's not something that is a major complaint for me. And I suppose just to add on to the end of this really is that we do want to see some bug fixes in terms of Battlefield 5's visibility. I don't think this is a Firestorm only problem, you know, this is just something that happens in Battlefield 5, and I feel, you know, that there needs to be a discernible way of changing the meta. I don't think this exists too much in squads, but definitely in solos, where people are just hiding in foliage. You know, it's gotten to a point where characters are so hard to distinguish in certain environments that people are just laying down, and it completely ruins the solo experience. I think that's something that needs looking at, less so an issue in squads, but it's something that is problematic and something that does need work. So troops, that's about it from me today, the Tactical Brit. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again in another video.